Good evening, everybody. We are so glad you're joining us by watching this video. We've had a little bit of an issue with the app that connects Zoom to Facebook, and that means that we cannot go ahead with our planned Facebook Live. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to host the conversation as we normally would on Facebook. And the only part that will be missing tonight, sadly, will be the interactions with you who are watching along. We won't get to see your comments in real time. This is the fourth week of our study working through this book, Almost Christmas. And so far we have talked about hope and peace and love. And tonight we get to talk a little bit about joy, that final piece of the Advent puzzle that we work our way through each year. Our format is going to be fairly simple. I've got a few questions. I've sent them out already to Pastor Alice and Pastor Rachel and Dr. Joan, who is joining us tonight. Welcome to you, Dr. Joan. You've just finished a rehearsal. We're so glad that you made it here and we get to have this conversation. So I'm going to open up with a prayer and then we'll get right into our conversation. Let's pray together. And gracious God, thank you for your goodness to us. Thank you for this Advent journey, a time when we get to think through what hope and peace and love and joy mean for us and what it means that they have been made real in the birth of the Christ child. And as we discuss joy tonight, Lord God, would you open up our hearts and our minds and our lives afresh to what this joy is and what it might mean for us. We ask all of this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
So, Alice and Rachel and Joan, let's get going with our conversation here. And I have a number of questions that came out whenever I was reading through this chapter. But the first one that came to me was really something that struck me from the opening paragraphs of what the author Matt Rawls says. He said that the joy is something that cannot be manufactured. Yet he also makes this point in the chapter that sometimes we find ways to try and manufacture joy in our lives. And that made me a little bit curious. What are some of the ways that you all have tried to manufacture joy in your lives? Are there ways that you've done it? And if so, what are they? Who? Let's go to Alice first.
Well, I guess, this time of year, I would say just the joy manufactured for me could have been in years past shopping for just the right gift for someone I love, putting a lot of thought into it, what would make them happy. That would bring me joy to see that whatever gift I chose delighted them in some way. So that might be one way. Another is, I love to cook for other people. And so I bring joy to myself when I cook for somebody and they like my food. So
Awesome.
those are a couple of examples for me
Awesome.
for this time of year. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. That's cool. Joan, what about you?
Obviously, as a church musician, I feel like part of my job is to provide joy to people, particularly at Christmas time through music. And I take a lot of groups to area nursing homes, and we are giving joy. I'll be honest, I'm not sure how much joy I am creating for myself. I wish I could. I think the first week I feel really good about it. But in his writing, he says joy is a gift. You can't achieve it. So I need to remind myself at this busy time of year, it's not about me. I want to keep giving joy to other people, but it's hard with my job when I go to a nursing home twice a week for a month. I get tired and my joy level goes way down. And what are your thoughts about that, Charlie? Can you overdo giving joy to other people? I mean, can you?
Well, I mean, certainly. I mean, I think there's certainly times that you give so much that you end up running on empty, and it's hard to experience joy when you're running on empty. So I think being careful in a busy season of knowing how you replenish your own supplies of energy and passion and joy. I think it's important to know how to do that and to when you're scheduling so many things like what you have in Advent, to be careful also to schedule some time to step back from it all and take a deep breath and replenish the supply of energy.
And it's not about joy for myself. And so my groups do bring incredible joy to other people. So I'm glad that we do that. I'm trying to think of an example this week. I'll think of it in a minute, but joy is just unexplainable, and it just happens. And it's not just because we're singing at a nursing home.
Yeah.
So that's when it clicks and something special happens.
Well, I'm gonna ask you to hold that thought, because that's a
Okay.
question that I'm going to circle back to later
Okay.
on in our conversation here. I think that's a really good observation. And Rachel, how about for you? Are there ways that you manufacture joy?
Yeah, so I think, and this kind of segues into another one of your questions. I think what happens when we try to manufacture joy is that we are equating joy and happiness together. So often what manufactured joy looks like is this appeal to try to either make other folks happy or try to make ourselves happy. But I recall back when I was in college, the thing people would always say to me, especially during worship, was like, "You're so joyful." And I don't get told that as much now. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think there was a performative aspect of what was happening that was being construed as joy, and not necessarily misconstrued, because I did think I was joyful, but that I had not understood quite the depths of what true joy can be, and instead just generally had a smile on my face, was upbeat, like I was 21. What do you expect? Like there aren't a lot of issues going on at that point in your life.
Yeah,
I
I
think
really
that's-
was struck with what Matt Rouse said about joy being a gift, and you can receive it and you can give it, but you can't make it. Yeah. So that's one of the things that struck home for me. And so, yeah, so like Dr. Joan, when you're performing, you are giving joy. People are receiving that joy from what you do. Similarly, when someone enjoys something I cook, I'm giving joy. But we can't, it's like salvation. You can't buy it. You can't earn it. You just have to receive it. And sometimes
Right.
it comes unexpectedly. Yeah.
That's right.
That's the word, unexpected. For me, that makes joy just come alive when something happens. You don't plan it, you don't try to create it. It just happens.
All right, listen, you guys are overachieving. You're getting ahead of my questions.
Sorry.
I'm gonna rein it back in here and take us through what I sent out to you, because I do want to come back to that. I think it's a really important, and it's going to be a special part of our conversation tonight, is to describe those moments when we've been surprised by joy. But hold that thought, we're not there yet. Okay, so what I'd love to think through is what Rachel was saying there. We're talking about manufacturing joy or manufacturing moments of happiness. Like what's the difference then? How is joy different from happiness, right? How do we describe that? Rachel, you started this conversation. So how is joy different from happiness?
Yeah, so I'm gonna pull out, I don't know how many people have seen this Pixar movie and who haven't, but there's this movie Inside Out, and it's about 5 different kind of emotions within this preteen's body. And Joy is constantly trying to do everything that she can to keep this kid like just going and happy, but she has experienced great change, and so even in the midst of like trying to keep her happy, the fear and the anger and other things are creeping in, and I think that's really where joy is that we can experience the depth of our emotion, but then feel the assurance that something greater is at work, even in our kind of sadness, and it's just kind of this mixture of I mean, human emotion. It doesn't exist in a one lane type of experience.
Mhm.
And there's that whole thought that he brings us to several times in the chapter of being able to experience joy even in your sadness, right? You don't have to be happy to experience joy. You can experience a depth of joy even in difficult moments. And I would like to say in response to what you're saying about that movie, I'm pretty sure even before I got here, this church did a whole series of
We
sermons on that
did.
movie,
We
right, Joan?
did. It was fun.
That's what I heard.
Yes,
That's what
we
I heard.
did.
Thank you. Well, and Joan, you can go next because you're talking already. So what's for you? How is joy different from happiness?
Happiness is short term for me. It's in the moment. It is a result of something that happened. Joy to me is just a deeper emotion that is like an underlying faith that gets replenished. I'm probably not making a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Joy is just deeper for me, and happiness is almost frivolous,
All
if I
right.
can be so
Yeah.
bold as to say that.
Mhm.
Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can. Alice, what would you add to that?
Can't add much to that because it's exactly my sentiment. There's some little something happens and you have a moment of happiness, right?
Mhm.
Whereas joy, it's it is very deep. And to me, it really goes together. It's almost joined together with peace and assurance. Um, I preached a sermon at Memorial a while back, and one of the examples I used is a woman I met when I was serving as a chaplain who had experienced a terrible, devastating automobile accident with her husband. And she had this big black eye. She'd lost her purse. She'd lost valuable jewelry, her medicines, and she was, I mean, she had nothing to be joyful about. But when I encountered her in the cafeteria at the church, and because I saw her in the emergency room, but the emergency room was slammed and I never had an opportunity to see her. So it was late at night and she was by herself. And I asked if I could join her and then we chatted. And, so she was telling me everything that had happened and she's smiling while she's telling me all of this. And I
Mhm.
said, I have to ask you, how is it that you're smiling and you seem to be perfectly okay, um, despite your husband having had a stroke and you don't know what the future holds for him and whether you'll find all your stuff again. And she said, she had her Southern drawl. She said, well, honey, when you know the Lord like I do, you just know everything's going to be okay. So to me, that's the core, that's that foundation of joy is knowing everything's going to be okay. Yeah.
It is. Listen, I could tell you stories just from pastoral encounters this week. Very similar, people just facing stuff, hard stuff, but
Mhm.
knowing that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And when that was communicated to me this week, that was my response. I was just able to say, that's the words of someone who has a deep and abiding faith in Christ, right?
Mhm.
And from that deep and abiding faith comes hope and peace and joy and love, just like what we've been talking about. It's good. It's good stuff. So one of the things that I like about this chapter is that Matt Rawle actually helps us dive into scripture in a number of spaces, right? So there's a number of points of scripture that he really sort of invites us to think through. And the first one that he comments on is Mark's gospel. And he makes a cool general comment just about Mark's gospel being, short and fast paced and punchy. And like Mark wastes no time with extra curricular details. Like it's the bare bones tabloid like presentation of this is who Jesus
That's
is,
the facts.
just the facts. That's exactly it. And Rawle makes this comment. He says that as he gets to the fourth Sunday of Advent in his church, in which they light the candle of joy on the fourth, not the third, but as he gets to the fourth Sunday of Advent each year, His dread is that the season is almost over and he has left little room for what the candles actually represent. So he compares that sort of rush of Mark's gospel to the rush of the way he approaches and journeys through Advent.
Mm.
So my question to you is, are we guilty of being in a similar kind of rush? And how does being in this rush towards Christmas, how does it actually get in the way of the Advent journey that we've been trying to take? And I'm going to come to Joan first because you're the busiest person in Advent who has so much going on, and it must be a rush. So talk to me a little bit about this, Joan.
I struggle with it every year, which is crazy. You'd think by now I would have learned. But every year, one thing is I can't say no to people because I know Christmas is such a special time. You know, people just want music, and so I don't say no. Again, it's about providing joy for other people. I do crash though sometimes, and just God makes my body slow down. I mean, I just have to. I'll get a cold, or so I'll just end up crashing at home and going to bed at 7 o'clock at night a couple nights, and that just helps replenish myself, my body, and time in the car to play my Spotify list of my favorite Christmas carols on cello. That's another way that I can center myself, and it's okay to just draw back from everything, and just I have to have those quiet moments so I can reconnect.
Yeah. And so that those quiet moments actually comprise almost like the stop off points on your Advent journey, right? Because you're so busy, you're so busy helping other people observe a holy Advent that it's really important for you to take moments and stop and do that same thing along the way. And it's good to hear that whether that's rest and sleep or whether that is a playlist in the car on your way to work or wherever you're going, it's just good to hear that as you're leading us through an Advent season, that you're getting to do that yourself. Yeah.
Because I know our people in congregation in the community, they wouldn't want me not to experience Advent and Christmas. I know they want me to. They love me and would hate to know how busy and stressed out I get. They would hate that for me. I know that.
We all hate that. We all hate that. Rachel, you are the only one here who has a young child, right? It's a busy time of year, and just preparing for a sort of magical young child Christmas time. Tell me, do you experience this rush, and does it get in the way of your own Advent journey?
So I'll tell you what, and I'm going to say a snarky comment, so I hope Matt Rowell never listens to this. I want to say, well, if you feel rushed and that you haven't experienced joy by the 4th week, why don't you switch it to the 3rd week, and you can be reminded of the joy of the season. Sorry, Matt. No, I think, it is busy, and somehow this week, the thing about school with a small child is that they put it all right before the holiday. So like this week has just been a rush. But what I appreciate about actually being in a pastoral role where you're planning sermons and studies like this is that in itself forces you to slow down if you let it. Right. If we're just rushing through to try to write the questions and read the chapter, it's going to all feel rushed. It's just going to feel like another thing. But by taking it slowly, even though I finished my sermon yesterday, right before I had to record it, still allowed me to sit in a text that I've heard, 30 something times at this point, but from a new lens. And the thing that I do lament, and I kind of wish that we would embrace more as a society, is the fact that we have in some ways flipped Christmas and Advent. So we do a lot of the Christmassy things during the Advent season. And then we do Christmas, and then we take a week off and rest at Christmas time, which is much needed, especially in church world. But when we have 12 days of Christmas, that we could be doing all of these, like, you know, festive, joyous holiday things.
Yeah, we push it, like the climactic moment is December 25th, right? And then it's like, you know, there's a pin put in the balloon, and it just sort of, you know, it pops after that, and it's recovery and rest. You're right, actually. You're right. The 12 days of Christmas are not observed. We're going to come back to Joan because she's got her hand up, and then we're going to go to Alice.
When I was the mother of a young child, I remember taking Maylee for a drive to see the Christmas lights. And I, you know, and to see the wonder and the sparkle in her eyes helped me relive being joyful in Christmas. I'll never forget that night. Never. And that was joy for me, seeing Christmas through the eyes of a child.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Alice, what have you got in response to this question?
Well, you know, I'm at a season in my life where I just don't permit the rush to happen. I just don't. Before we went broadcasting here, I was sharing that this year I told my family, I'm not buying you Christmas presents this year, and I don't want you to buy me anything this year, because this year I'm making donations in your honor. And this is the first year, I think, that I really have not experienced this urgency, this rush, like I have in years past. But like you, Joan, you know, to me, one of the special joys of Christmas is seeing it through children's eyes and seeing them experience joy. You know, I had my little great grandson over last weekend, and he was just, he's only barely, he's not quite a year old, but he is very aware of, wow, there's all a bunch of stuff around here, and I can't wait to grab it. You know, from the Christmas ornament, we had to move the tree, then we had to move this, and we had to move that. But we were laughing while we were doing it all, because that too is joy-filled, right? Seeing a tiny child just experience the wonder, even at that tender age. So I miss having children around. So the other night at the Yoke Fellows party with little Austin there, I was filled with joy just watching him dance with Santa and sit with you, Charlie, while you're playing the guitar, and him playing his little air guitar and playing his little air horn. And yes, children make.
And all that makes me, God sent a baby. And I find so much, we could have some deep theological discussions about that.
Yes,
we could.
Baby.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, we could.
You can have the deep theological conversation too about, like, just the joy that comes with parenting, because it's not fun. Like the thing we keep saying, I mean, it is fun, but the thing we keep saying as we anticipate the second one is like, so it's gonna be hard, but we're gonna like it. But it's gonna be hard. Like that to me is also this joy of like, it's hard, but we're gonna like it at the same time.
Yeah, well, there's always the drudgery that goes along with you know, anything that's joy-filled, right? There's the cleanup, there's the, you know, with children, it's the tantrum at the worst time, it's the thing they say or do that embarrasses you. You know, it's the all the dirt. You know, that you never ever get cleaned up, you know, you get it cleaned up and it's right back again. But that's life, isn't it? Isn't that life?
There's joy in the midst of it all. And I just think it's, you know, I think that's our biggest point, getting us back to the book, because I'm going to keep us on this book, right? Get us back to the book. That's the big point in it all, is that joy is always there for people of faith and who have experienced this good news. And we'll come to a question about that in a few minutes. So we talked a little bit about Alice's story from the ER that she shared in that sermon and shared again here tonight. On page 88, Matt Rawle tells us this story of the woman who, in the longest night service, has an experience of joy in silence, right? She experiences this silence as a space where no one is asking her to kind of put on the mask of, telling the story of how she's doing and explain how she is and things like that. So it's really a comment on the place of silence in our experience of joy. And I wondered, have any of you experienced joy in moments of silence? And I'm going to come to Rachel first on that one.
I'm laughing because I don't get silence. So every time that I have a moment to myself right now of quiet, I mean, today was my spiritual day, and part of it was just laying quietly in my room because it is never silent in our house. And I love the noise, but you can't hear yourself think half the time when you fill your head, when the noise is all around you, but when you fill your head, with thoughts even. And that's one of the important parts about spiritual disciplines like silence and meditation, is that you allow the space for joy to break in, or to hear the voice of God in different ways. And not to say that happened today, but I mean, it is, yeah, I mean, even in our own longest night service, when we were there a few weeks ago, one of the most powerful moments to me was that there was a point between the lighting of the candles, right? And then we sat in silence, and then we sang "It Came Upon a Midnight Clear," which just emotes this idea of quiet and clarity. And that, I mean, it was very moving.
Yeah. And there's a depth of joy in that. Alice, what about you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question. I lost my husband 2 years ago, and he was quite ill toward the end. And the days often were very, very difficult for him and for me. And when he was gone, there was the grieving was fresh. But I had a moment where the people were gone and I was alone. And I was just, I guess, reminiscing and in silence and in prayer. And I had this moment of unexpected joy because the realization really hit me that Bud was free. He was free. And he was free of a body that didn't serve him any longer. He was free of a mind that, was creating moments of indignity for him. And all of that was gone. And so the joy that I felt was joy for him. So it was I was almost like sharing his joy, if that makes any sense at all. Thinking about how grand it must feel to be just out there floating or flying or whatever we do, when we enter into the heavenly realms. So that was one of those unexpected moments of joy that came in silence. In silence, for sure.
Thank you. Joan, what about you and silence?
This I struggle with. I can create an atmosphere of silence. I actually have a beautiful waterfall feature in my tiny little backyard, and I can make time and sit there, but to shut off everything that goes in your mind, to stop the little guinea pig on the wheel, if that's the image. That's very hard for me, but I'm learning. And so I focus on sounds like the water or birds singing. That helps me a lot. Real quick, I'll address a little bit of what my husband died about 5 years ago, and I'll say this as a humorous aside. if you knew my husband, he was the life of the party. He had all of our televisions going all the time because he was a political junkie. My house was never quiet. I adored my husband, but when he was no longer with me after he died, I, of course, grieved. I still grieve. But there was one moment when I thought, this is what it means to have quiet. There's not a television on. And I actually embraced that and said, Tarver, I miss you. I love you, but I am so blank glad that there's not a television running in my house. So I've rediscovered a little bit of silence. I hate television, except for Netflix, but I just the constant drone of negative news, but that gets me off on a bunny trail. But have I yeah, I struggle, and it's a constant struggle for me to embrace silence, but I'm learning how to do that.
I think, listen, I think it's one of the hardest things for us to do. There's constantly noise, the noise of thought, the noise of
Yeah.
a TV or a radio, or the noise of conversations. Like there's always noise there. And I think the spiritual discipline of taking silence doesn't come naturally to us. And any time I've ever spoken with people about that in a pastoral setting, I think it's the hardest thing in the world, even to set a timer on your phone and take 5 minutes and try and devote those 5 minutes solely to God in some way. It's hard to do it without thinking of what's for dinner, or what's coming up next week, or whatever it is. So you're not alone in that, Joan. And I think anyone who's watching this can probably relate very much to the struggle that you described there. I want to move us on a little bit, and of course this whole Advent book is known as a Wesleyan Advent experience. And so each chapter we have sort of dipped into how this relates to the writings of John Wesley primarily. But in this one, he takes us to Charles Wesley, John's brother, and to one of the most famous carols that was written by Charles Wesley. I believe it's "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," and he lands on this line, where he says the line I think it's halfway through the first verse, God and sinners reconciled. And Matt Rawle takes some time just to tell us that this really is where joy is experienced. He says, for Wesley, salvation and joy go hand in hand. Joy comes from knowing that God is near and salvation is offered to all. I just want to ask you, do you share Wesley's understanding around that from what you were reading in the book? Alice, let's come to you first. Do you share that?
Absolutely, I share it. One of my favorite stories about John Wesley is when he questioned his salvation. And his mother, Susanna, wrote him a letter. And she said, well, John, when your head and your heart get joined together, then you'll have, I'm paraphrasing what she said, actually said in the letter, but you'll have that peace. And so when John Wesley has the Altar's Gate experience and he feels his heart strangely warmed, and he says, I knew without a shadow of a doubt, I had this blessed assurance. And that's why I said what I did earlier about, I kind of can't separate joy and peace from one another, and assurance. Those three just kind of go together for me, because that altogether joy that Raoul's talking about is that abiding joy, that abiding peace, that abiding assurance. It's not a moment of happiness. It's abiding despite your circumstances, where you're holding in each hand, whatever the troubles of your life are, whether it's anger or frustration or grieving, along with this joy. And you're holding them together and you're actually experiencing them together. It's one reason why I love the passage from James, which Raoul didn't quote, which is one of my favorites. Consider all joy
Yeah.
when you encounter various trials. Now, it has a different message, but yes, when we have this understanding that all things work together for good, that for those of us who know the Lord, we know, even if we can't see it, even if it's kind of beyond our grasp at the moment, we know it's all gonna be okay, right? Because we have the assurance of our salvation, and we know how our story ends, and we know how the story ends.
Yeah. Joan, what about you? Salvation and joy go hand in hand. Do you share this understanding with us?
Definitely. And I love the line, it's on page 90. There is no joy for those who feel there's no forgiveness.
Yeah.
I just love that. And I love the second verse of Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Joyful, all ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. And that makes me see a big global image of joyful people living in peace. And I just love that verse. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, no, it is. It's powerful. It's powerful. This idea of joy and salvation together, that it being a salvation which is for all peoples, for the world, right?
yeah, right.
It's this
Yes.
offering for the world. And I think Wesley was clear on that, right? Salvation is
And I
offered to.
love the thought on Christmas Eve that churches all over the world, a lot of denominations sing this hymn.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It
it's
was my
not
mother's
just us
favorite.
in Fernandina Beach. I
Yeah.
just love that. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I
Rachel,
love
how
the
about
word
you?
triumphant, because triumphant, it's victory, right? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so.
It is. It is. Rachel, talk to me about
Yeah.
this.
No, I absolutely agree. Silence, not here. But I it takes it back to the origins and to the nativity story. I think when we think about saved by grace and our salvation, that joy comes specifically in this season through an infant, through God being made human, that salvation comes for all people because God has decided, or has humbled God's self to be in the human experience. And but so it just all goes together.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. It's powerful. And I think, I had a conversation about this chapter with one of my other small groups this morning, and we just spent a lot of time talking about this very thing, about how in our salvation, when we sit with our salvation, when we sit with this idea that God has reached out to the world and has invited us to receive this gift of grace, and what that can mean in terms of peace and assurance, like you talk about, Alice, and the sort of deep experience of joy that brings. It's a contentment, a joyful contentment that God holds all things and is reconciling all things unto himself. I think it's powerful. And I think it's actually one of the gifts of this Wesleyan understanding of the gospel, right? It's a gift that we offer to the world in terms of understanding God's work among us and around us, and how we get to join in and be a part of that work as well.
Yeah.
So I want to push into page 91, and there's a quote that I wrote out here, and I want to just read through it and then ask a question attached to it. It says, when we aren't feeling particularly joyful, we often find ourselves jumping into a small group, giving extra to the offering, or volunteering at the local elementary school in order to make ourselves feel good about our Advent preparations. He says, don't get me wrong, surrounding ourselves with the habit of study, stewardship, and service are good things. But these things alone, he says, can only produce an almost joy. The seemingly joyful feeling is often short-lived, and soon we find ourselves overfilling our schedule in order to capture something that these activities simply cannot provide. So my question to you all is, with that in mind, and this idea that he's getting through in mind, how do we avoid falling into that kind of trap in our search for joy? And I'm not just talking about our Advent journey. I'm talking about like across our spiritual lives in general. This idea that we must do more, be more, be involved and serve more in order to experience this joy that we're pursuing? How do we avoid falling into that trap? And let's come to Joan.
Busyness does not equate with joy.
Right?
You can't be even if you're busy doing good things.
Hmm.
There's just a point where it leave, and that's a hard one. You have to regulate yourself and have boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to have healthy boundaries, and you can't just keep saying yes, 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 just because it's a good thing to do. It's a Christian thing to do. It's something our church is offering. I just hate the word busy. I don't want to be busy. I want to be what? Help me out here. I want to be what?
Effective?
What?
Effective?
No, attentive or open to, I don't know. I just, y'all gonna have to help me with the word. I can't think of it, but I just don't like the word busy.
Mhm.
No, I think that makes sense, Joan. I think,
What?
and
Yep.
I think it makes sense. You know, I think all of us in a busy work lives and a busy church, all of us can fall into the trap of just being like a what a pinball, like just being knocked from place to place and being
Mhm.
involved in thing after thing. So I think busyness is a trap that we can all fall into. And I think what you're saying about self-regulation and what we're saying about being alert to those things.
Intentionality.
Yeah,
Intentionality. Does
yeah,
that
yeah, that's it.
bring
That's
it
it.
into focus?
Yeah.
That's it. And living with that alertness to, hey, I've got to be careful with this.
Mhm.
And I, you know, yes, things have to get done,
Right.
but really, is it going to be at the cost of my joy? Just to be busy. I think that's important. So,
Mhm.
Rachel, what would you say to that?
It reminds me this idea of busyness somehow meaning you're going to find joy. It reminds me a lot about her, just of the image of trying to fill the void or try to fill,
Mm.
you know, you're
Mhm.
filling your life hoping to find something. And sometimes the thing that you need to do is just take a step back from
Mhm.
everything in order to find the perspective or to feel and experience joy. And really, I mean, it goes back to that conversation about having to fill our own spiritual, I guess, pitchers or cups or whatever image you want. If you are, thank you. If you are constantly operating in a spiritual desert, I don't quite know how you can experience that joy. Some of us always experience the joy.
We can hear that. We love it. And we love it. Alice, what would you say about this question?
Well, I think for some people, it's seeing so much need around you and feeling compelled to try to fulfill all of those needs. And at the same time, give yourself a feeling of satisfaction that you've met these needs somehow. But I love the story, and it's a story of the grandfather who's walking with his granddaughter on the beach after a terrible storm, and there are thousands of starfish that have washed up on the shore. And the little girl's running and she's picking them up and she's throwing them back into the ocean. And the grandfather catches up with her and he says, "What are you doing?" She says, "Well, if I don't throw them back, they're going to die." And he said, "Well, honey, there's thousands of them. What difference can you possibly make?" And she picks one up and she throws it in. She says, "Well, I made a difference for that one."
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's piggybacking on Joan's great word, intentionality. It's focusing on the one thing, the one person, um, being aware and open to God's leading in this and not rushing to be here and there and everywhere, but waiting to see what's the one thing that God's going to put in front of you. What's the one thing that in prayer, this is what I'm supposed to do in this moment or this day or whatever. It's really, I mean, we make a difference one person at a time.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's all about focusing on the one. That I think avoids this helter-skelter running around trying to be all things to all people and, satisfy needs. And the other thing I've learned too, and this early in my journey, this was, I was like that, I came to the realization that, if I don't say no to this, maybe I'm keeping someone else
Mhm.
from doing what God's calling them to do.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's powerful. That's powerful. And I think, come on ahead, Rachel. You got something else?
I'm going to add one more thing now that I don't have the interruption in the background. And it goes a little bit along that, the other way that I think about joy is, the concept of tithing or of giving generously, and how there is an element of saying, all right, we are responsible in some way for tithing, but there's also an element that's talks about giving with a joyful heart. And if you can't give with a joyful heart, then maybe you need to work toward that. But I think that can be kind of copy pasted into everything. So if you can't do without a joyful heart, or if you can't, I don't know, if you can't say I'm in this with a joyful heart, then maybe that is the place where you take a step back from what you're doing and say, okay, this is too much, or this is, how do I learn to grow my own joy by focusing more on the one, or on something that maybe is not what you expected to focus on.
Yeah. No, I think that's right on it there. And just what you had already said, actually, just the ability to take the step back and to to turn to, devotionally turn your heart towards God, or take some time to reflect on who God is for you, and on what God's calling you to be, but actually filling the cup of your own journey with Christ is, when we stop doing that, and when we start going and just pouring out to try and fill that cup, I mean, it just never works. And I think, that's something that we see time and time again. So avoiding falling into that trap, I think Joan's word of intentionality is so, so important, is to be intentional about filling the spiritual cup in our lives, about filling the cup with Christ in a way that creates wonder within our hearts and creates joy deep within, and makes service, as you're saying, Rachel, something that is joyful, that makes giving joyful, that makes study or holy conversation and fellowship, it makes it joyful, as opposed to it being some kind of obligation through which we're trying to deepen our roots in Christ. So, and I think that's, all of those answers are good and important there. A couple more questions before we round out our conversation here. We've got about 10 more minutes. The first one is that Matt Rawle talks to us a little bit about joy being experienced even in the midst of difficult times, for people who know Christ and who know salvation and who have reflected on those things. So I really just want to ask you, because, I've got to assume there's some people watching this video who will be facing this time of year, and just, it's a hard time, whether they were at our longest night service or not, they're maybe just going through struggles. I saw a lot of them in hospital today. I was telling some of you earlier, there's just people that are going through stuff this week as we move towards Christmas. So for those that are going through a hard season right now, what can an altogether joy look like? And Joan and Alice, you both already talked a little bit about that already, in terms of just some of your own testimonies of loss and grief over the last number of years. Is there anything, Joan, that you would add to that?
Joy just comes in unexpected places. And I'll give an example. I was Christmas caroling, and I took a group to our local hospital, and I was worn out and tired and did not want to be there. And we go down a hall, and a young mother comes to the door with her newborn baby. And that was just a moment for me. And we sang Silent Night, and I almost wept with joy that I received such a gift in that moment. I had no idea we were on the maternity floor or whatever. I mean, anyway, it was just, what was your question, Charlie?
The question was, how does someone experience an altogether joy if they're going through a hard season? Where can they find it, or
You
how can
have to, for me, I have to leave myself open to unexpected gifts.
yeah, right there. And when you get one, like name it, right? To
Name
be able
it,
to say,
realize it. Yes,
yeah, this
Mhm.
is a joy moment, right? This
right,
is a moment and it's a gift, and
right.
I'm gonna receive it and hold on to it and tell my friends
Exactly.
about it on the internet later, right? So that's like,
Mhm.
it's a good thing because you're sharing a story, and it shares joy. Just the vision of that, as I imagine it, is a joyful thing for me. Rachel, how about you?
Well, I love the psalm that he includes on page 96. I mean, he talks about Psalm 30 and just that weeping and joy come together or can come together, that there's a place for crying and joy. And you know, I don't think of it as like a linear time thing, you know. It's not like you are going to be in one stage one day and then wake up and haha, it's like another thing. But you know, like this, just this space to be able to feel, you know, feel sadness and feel like crying, and then know that there is going to come a point where that will change in those little moments. And it may be later in the day, something you experience like a newborn baby, or you know, weeks from then. But
That's the importance of the Advent journey, isn't it? You know, just to be on the lookout for
mhm.
signs of hope and peace and joy and love, and to be able to name them and to be able to share them with some other people is all part of this journey of anticipation. You know, as we wait for the morning to come, right? As we wait for joy to arrive, what are we noticing on the way? I
Mhm.
think that's a word. Alice, what about you?
Well, a couple of thoughts. On page 93, at the bottom of the page, Ralph says, as Paul put it, joy is the peace of God which passes all understanding. So, you know, those moments of sadness or grief or sorrow or trouble or whatever, um, you know, often if we wait for it, if we're open to it, then the Spirit gives us that moment of deep peace about whatever it is we're experiencing in the moment. But you know, I love the unexpectedness of things that happen um, when you're, especially when you're maybe in that moment of a little bit of despair or just sadness. I had that happen just the other day in my backyard. You know, I've got some trees that I planted that on city property. And I put Christmas ornaments on them every year. And the back of my house is an egress into Egan's Creek. So people are walking in the back, like my backyard, all the time. And the other day, someone stopped and just they were examining each one of the ornaments on that tree, and they didn't see me. I was sitting in the living room just looking out the window. And that was one of those moments of unexpected joy. It just made me
Right.
happy that they found a little bit of joy from an ornament in an unexpected place for them. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's about
Yeah.
all.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what I would say to folks who are watching along. You know, if you're going through a difficult season right now, it's to catch those little moments, right? To catch it's almost like breathing space on your journey.
Mhm.
And don't be afraid to crack a smile whenever you do experience a moment like that. You know, it's not dishonoring a grief or a pain or a difficulty. It's actually a moment of relief on the way through, and it's a gift, and it is a gift. You know, whether you're looking out the window and seeing people stop at your tree, or whether it's a moment in a hospital when you're singing to someone, just the discipline of recognizing a moment and receiving it and being grateful for it. I think all of those are important aspects of experiencing an altogether joy as you go through a difficult season. So all the way through this chapter, Matt Rawle, I mean, he's a pretty repetitive writer. I just see that all the way through, but he repeats this line all the way through. He says, the joy is the steadfast assurance that God is with us.
Mhm.
So where do you all feel this kind of assurance, and how does this assurance bring you joy? And I think this is just a good summary question for our whole journey and for our whole conversation tonight. And Alice, I'm going to come to you first with it.
Well, I'm the kind of person that I bore easily. I oftentimes don't go home the same way because I want to experience something different. But for me, the wonder of Advent is the tradition, the telling of the story once again, and the telling of the story and the realization that God did come to us as a vulnerable, tiny baby to be one of us, to experience vulnerability, to experience everything that we as human beings experience, to show us, look, I know how you feel. I'm with you. To me, the wonder of Christmas morning is the realization, yes, Jesus is born. Jesus is alive. Emmanuel is with us. And so it's just that reminder, God is with us. God came again. And moment by moment, we should be feeling that way. But that's, to me, the importance of the Advent season, of reminding ourselves, Emmanuel, God is with us.
Awesome. Joan, how about you? How do you experience this kind of assurance?
Page 103, experiencing joy and experiencing God are one and the same. That really
Right.
spoke to me. And later on, God begins where words end. So for me, it's when I can't describe something and I just have, I become breathless. And that's joy. I know it's joy there, and that it's God. God is the source of my joy. So for me, God and joy are the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. Joan, do you remember way back in the days before COVID, you took me down for a journey to your old school where you got your doctoral degree?
Mhm.
And at that time, we spent a lot of that day talking with the director of the school about beauty, right? And about
Yes.
experiencing joy and beauty and finding God in the midst of things that are beautiful, right?
Right.
I think that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. I think of that often, you know, as we experience God, often it's in a moment of beauty and we take joy in such a moment. You know, I have a picture in my house that I look up at often, and you know, everybody else walks past it all the time and experiences nothing. But I can experience something in it because there's beauty in that picture for me. And there's a moment that I can stop and breathe and enter into that moment. And it's a moment of real joy. And I've had that picture hanging up for 22 years, right? We got it on our honeymoon. Like it's just something that gives joy. And that's a little bit of what I hear. Am I making a fair
Totally. And that's what I love about my job, if I want to call it. It's more than a job, but I feel like God put me here to help people experience God through beauty. Yeah, I'm here to provide moments of beauty.
Yeah.
And I'm so lucky to be able to do that. Yeah.
You really do. You really do. Rachel, how about you? Is this your experience? How do you experience this kind of assurance, and how does it bring you joy?
I think so. I meet with the preschoolers every Wednesday for chapel through Lamb. We just started this during Advent, but something that I was thinking about today, because we sat down and I pulled out my little finger puppets again, and we were about to do the Wiseman story, and their teacher goes, oh, well, they know it all. And that is assurance right there that joy is something that lasts beyond our physical experience, right? Like Alice was saying, the Advent story is not something that we say once and then we never hear again, but we get to re-experience that joy every year. And we've been doing it for thousands of years. And that says something right there. It's that this joy is lasting eternally beyond, I hate to say beyond the peace and the hope and things like that, but that joy is something that continues to carry us through the seasons every year. And it's something that our littlest ones pick up on and then share with others as well. And despite the fact that we have like 12 nativity books in our house, each one says something different that kind of, sheds light on that joy of the season.
Mhm.
It's like there's a perpetual power and reigniting joy that comes with it each year. And there's something different. I'm looking at my Christmas Eve sermon, and I've preached loads of them now,
Mhm.
but still, there's something in this moment, in this time, in this place. God is real. God is alive. God is at work, and we are tuned into the work of the Spirit. And there's always something to say that is going to land in just the right space and in just the right way. And that in itself is an experience of the joy of God. And it lasts. It was here before us. We get to experience, but it'll be here long after all of our time as well. And that's good news. So this isn't altogether Christmas we've been thinking about tonight. It's been altogether joy. We've discussed altogether hope, peace, love, and joy. And I just want to thank you all for your time tonight. I want to thank you for your answers, for thinking about these questions. And Joan, thank you for joining us and bringing your input here. To everyone else, thank you for joining us throughout the weeks of this Advent journey. We hope that it's been helpful for you. We do look forward to joining with as many of you as possible in our Christmas Eve services this coming weekend, both digital and in person on our campus. So, and if we don't get to see you, we do wish everybody, of course, a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. God bless you all, and thank you for watching along with us these last number of weeks. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Merry Christmas.